Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. I'm Chris Dunn. I am with Blue Hive Exhibits, and we're super happy to be here on this lovely Thursday. I've got a couple of guests. This is actually the first show where all three of us are actually Blue Hivers. So super excited to dive in and talk to a couple of my coworkers. But real quick, I'm going to make a quick introduction to Dana Esposito, who's sitting in the co-host seat. Hey, Dana, how goes it?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Esposito. I am the EVP of Strategy here at Blue Hive. I come from the side of exhibit design as an actual exhibit designer and also creative leadership and corporate strategy. And I've been in the industry 30 years. So, Dawn Marie, let everyone know who you are.
So, my name is Dawn Marie Raczka, and I am the Executive Vice President of Global Business Development here at Blue Hive. My main function is really leading the BlueMed division, which is the pharmaceutical, medical device, and life science division of Blue Hive. I have been in the industry for a little over 20 years, really trained and mentored under some of the very best people in the industry. And now it's been an adventure being here at Blue Hive for about 11 and a half years in my role and at the capacity I'm at. And just really excited to join the both of you today. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you here. This has been on the books for a long time, so we're really excited to
Yes.
have this conversation.
Sorry about my
Um,
schedule.
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Dawn
Yeah.
Marie's going to she's going to tell you all about it. But it's amazing how many differences there are from uh, a lot of the clients that I deal with in
Mhm.
manufacturing and high tech and food and so forth. And her specialty really requires some very similar but much more refined skill sets, as I guess, as it were. So before we jump into those questions, I'm going to just remind everybody that we're sponsored not only by Blue Hive. So Blue Hive is a wonderful creative agency. We're over 100 people, but we're kind of that perfect size where we're not so big that you're just a number, and we're not small and we're boutique-ish, but we're not so small that we don't have the resources to get things done. We are coast to coast, Boston based, as well as Las Vegas for our West Coast customers. And we bring a lot of creative firepower and wonderful customer service to the table. In addition to Blue Hive, we're also sponsored by the folks at Fist Bump. Now, Fist Bump is the agency that is actually running this particular podcast. And I started coaching with them a couple of years ago to kind of upscale and upgrade my LinkedIn game. And I don't know, 8 months or so ago, it was brought to my attention that doing a podcast would be a great idea. So it was tough to get off the ground until I finally agreed and said, yes, you know what? You guys at Fist Bump know what you're doing. Please go ahead and take this. The lift was a little too heavy for me, and they handle all the hard stuff. So we show up, we have wonderful conversations. They help us put these things together. This form of media really helps bring Blue Hive as to the forefront as thought leaders, and just allows us a platform to have these wonderful conversations from folks in all different aspects and walks of life within the event forum. So, without further ado, we'll kick it back to Dana and Dawn Marie to get things started with the meat and potatoes of the actual podcast.
Yep. All right. So, Dawn Marie, can you start to tell us a little bit why specifically pharmaceutical and medical events are different from, say, other shows, other clients that are dealing in manufacturing or technology or things like that?
The number one difference is we're dealing with the FDA. And the FDA has many rules and regulations and compliance. So when an exhibit is created, you really have to go by the FDA rules. And so, these are very outlined. Every company that approaches our team here at Blue Hive really they already understand what their legal and compliance teams feel comfortable with. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount involved. So it's not just the design, but there's a whole process to the design, how it's laid out, whether there's a pipeline, whether there's a med affairs, there could be an international piece to it. Then you have your commercial space, and each space has really its own rules. So because of this, that really is a good part of what separates us. And in addition, the FDA does walk the floor in these conventions. They are constantly really being aware, and it's for two reasons. So there's twofold to this. It's really to, the first is to protect the patient, right? Because the FDA was really formed to protect the public, the general public, with taking, whether it's a compound or whatever it might be, but also it's a guideline. So when they're walking the floor and they're looking for a company that is exhibiting, especially in the pharmaceutical arena, they are making sure that black boxes are really shown, the ISI, the PI in place, right? The prescribing information with a tagline, with a compound, the name of the compound. And when the important aspect about all of this is that as the exhibit house and the agency really working together, we want to make sure that whatever is being presented and goes through the legal and the compliance team with the exhibitor, that there's nothing that they can be fined, because these fines are millions of dollars. And what makes it even a little more important is that every doctor that might be using the formulation, they get a letter from the FDA stating that this company broke part of the rule. So you want to stay away from that. It's something that every company and every pharmaceutical arena, even in some cases medical device, because in some instances, more and more medical device companies are being held to a little bit of a higher standard than maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I hope that helps explain really the vast importance of the exhibit house truly having a team that understands all the intricacies of the industry.
Yeah, and what I've noticed, sorry, Chris. So what I've noticed in the past, because I've worked at two different companies with you now, I've been very fortunate that way, and both of whom have had, quite a handful of pharmaceutical and med device clients, plus other industries, right? So there's really a vast difference, like you're speaking to, and even from the design standpoint, I learned a lot about, as the designer, how to approach that, and there are a lot of differences for our audience, because we really want to make sure that we're providing education to some maybe trade show and event marketers who are newer to the industry and maybe haven't worked at a pharmaceutical company yet. I just want to explain a few of the acronyms that you used. So can you tell everyone like what ISI is, and can you also explain what the difference between like a pipeline is versus medical affairs or scientific affairs and consumer, because those are all very specific terms to pharma.
Sure. So ISI is important safety information. So for example, if anyone has ever gone to a pharmacy and you've had a prescription that you've picked up, it comes with a folded sheet of paper. And in that sheet of paper, you can open it up, and it's important safety information. So it's the benefits, but it's also potentially the side effects. Or, for example, if you have between the hours of 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. have been on regular stations, and all of a sudden there is a commercial for a pharmaceutical compound that comes up. Well, while the commercial is going on and you see people going, in the background, you have got the important safety information being shared, or it could be written. All again, FDA has to, they approve these things. So that's one thing. So for example, in a commercial space, when you're designing an exhibit and you have medical affairs, so anytime a compound is launched, Every company is a little bit different, but for 1 to 2 years after that commercial brand launch, you always typically will have, it's required, whether they call it medical affairs or medical information. Every company is a little bit different, but the commercial people that are working in the space, they have a doc come up, and this doctor might talk about efficacy. What's your efficacy? Is this compound, can it be used to treat another symptom? So a second indication, maybe it's not been trialed yet. So immediately your rep that's in the booth has to walk the doctor outside of the commercial area, literally has to go into the aisle, off the carpet, and walk around to where Med Affairs is. The Med Affairs or medical information is sourced typically with nurse practitioners, and they are able to help answer the questions that maybe the doctor has. So that's very important.
They have to be legally separated in the exhibit space.
Very important.
Yes.
And literally, you can't just have, like, say, Med Affairs has a foot,
Did I freeze?
for example, between commercial, and maybe there's an area that they could squeak through. No, you don't have that. For example, Dana, when you build a booth, that wall's going to come to the very end of the exhibit space carpet, and they have to walk out that aisle. There is no way. That there's a reason for that. So another thing is, for example, when the doctor might go to the Med Affairs, if there's a hanging sign, if the doctor looks up, the hanging sign cannot show the commercial product. It can have the company logo, it can be generic, but it cannot have a commercial drug, cannot show it. Okay, so that's another thing. The pipeline area also has to be kind of blocked off from Med Affairs. Now, it's not in some cases, pipeline can be within the commercial space, but in its own area, it's not as rigid. Okay, so, and again, this varies from company to company. Years ago, it was like pipeline was completely blocked off too. At least with some of the clients we're working with now, there's more of an ease. There might be a structure or wall, but it's not as rigid. And pipeline really is all the different compounds they have in whether it's first, second, or third stage trial. And a doctor can go up because obviously there is someone manning the pipeline area, because doctors are really, I love our doctors. They're always looking to see what's in pipeline. That's actually a part of a panel that we've been a part of, or I've been in the audience where doctors are being asked, for example, why are you going to these conferences? And part of the reason is they go into the exhibit hall is because they really want to see what's in pipeline. Very important. Doctors think all the time about helping their patients. And this is like a really important way that they do that. They always want to be knowledgeable. They're also eligible. Some of their patients might be eligible for trials. This is where they can potentially sign up for trials for their patients. Now, patients have to meet a very special criteria to be able to be part of that trial. But that's another very important piece that is part of that pipeline area. And then, of course, we know the commercial space. Commercial space can have multiple commercial pieces. Maybe clients decide there's a large enough space where they break up their different formulations. Or there's times that they have digital panels that might show everything that they offer under one umbrella. But these are some of the nuances of the exhibit space.
Thanks.
pretty specific. So I'm going to go back, and I know you addressed this, that the fines are very substantial. And that's kind of what I wanted to, I guess, just weigh in on, is that an infraction on the part of the exhibiting company isn't a slap on the wrist. It's not a, oh, your sign is a foot too high, and we're going to, we're going to take away your points, or we're going to, just, slap your wrist for the next time. Like, these are substantial concerns. So obviously the pharmaceutical companies that are exhibiting are totally dialed into this. And they are looking to cover their butts, and they need to pick partners who absolutely know what they're doing. Right. So when people come in and investigate Blue Hive as an option, and you're able to talk to them about our division, BlueMed, which really single-handedly handles really all of our pharma and a lot of our med device companies and so forth, that really shows the inquiring companies that we have a skill set and we have experience along those lines. So
it's interesting because in my, I've had clients say, say they make, I don't know, say they make watches, and they're like, but hang on, we really like to work with you, but do you work on any of our competitors? That may be okay that you work on the competitor, they just want to know, or it might not be okay with them. Well, it's very different. I've noticed with pharmaceutical clients, they're like, hey, do you work on other pharmaceutical companies? And we're like, well, yes. And they're like, because we want to know you're very fluent in everything that we're up against, because they still have to deal with all the rules and regulations that are like a regular industry would have to deal with, the heights and the setbacks and all of those things that like your exhibit designer and your CAD engineers are going to make sure your exhibit meets that criteria. But there's that whole second layer that Dawn Marie's talking about of additional, not just rules and regulations, but laws. So that's why they're like, yes, thank God you're already versed in our world. Now you can just help us solve our problems. Like, they don't have to train us in what they're already up against, because there's just so many rules. And Chris, I noticed that we have a question from a LinkedIn user.
Yes, I saw that as well. So one of the great parts about having a live show is we can take call-ins or questions. So this question here, and I can't see who that is asking, but the question's a good one. What makes HCPs different from from attendees in other types of shows? So at the personas that are there, the visitors, can you handle that, Dawn Marie?
No,
let us know what your thoughts there.
It's almost similar to they're scientists. I mean, it's a different market segment. But healthcare professionals, obviously, most of them go to college. They, to become a doctor, or even, it could be a PharmD, depending upon, what conference it might be. And, it's just they're trained in a different mindset and a different science compared to, say, this is going to be really very contrasting. But say an engineer who builds skyscrapers, they have to make sure the mechanics of a skyscraper that is, say, going to be put up in New York City isn't going to fall and crash and kill millions of people, right? So doctors are very much trained as scientists, but as well as they're patient advocates. And most doctors, if you were to ask them why they go into the profession, it would be my belief would be because they care and they want to make a difference and make the lives of their patients improved and better. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. And that was Julius, by the way, who asked that question. And I think, if I could just add an inference to it as well, is knowing your attendee, knowing the persona of the folks who are coming to your show. And so you have the ability to talk to them, right? So I think when you're talking to healthcare professionals, you're able to dive right in and talk about very specific things, whether it's how it affects the patients or how is the compound made or things like that, right? Versus if I'm at a technology show, I might be talking to a finance person, might be talking to a salesperson, might be talking to somebody from anywhere across that business landscape. So I think that probably changes how specific you can be with those conversations.
Yeah.
It's
And also,
And I've noticed they tend to be seeking very specific information. Like they go into an exhibit knowing what they're after. Like they'll tell you straight up, like, oh, I've prescribed this, or I
yeah,
don't prescribe this because I had heard this. Like they lay it on the line, and they are very eager to always know what has been approved or what is coming down the pipeline or what could be improved. They're just seeking accurate information so that they can be as successful as they can for their patients. And they tend to be, if we're just talking like personas, they tend to be kind of a competitive, if I'm just describing a human nature of them. um, when I'm thinking about the exhibit, I might do something geared towards that as an interactive, knowing they're seeking information, that we want them to leave that exhibit having learned specific information. So my interactives and engagement will follow that line. I'm not likely to do something that's terribly, I don't want to say silly, but I likely wouldn't put like a random example. Like I'm likely not going to put a stage in there that a doctor would get up on and like do a Wii game where they have to like dance Party USA or something, right? I mean, it's a crazy bananas example, but I'm just trying to give. It's just a good example of
right.
they're not likely to want to make a show of themselves unless it's something competitive, and a little more not serious, but in that vein.
Right. Dana, did you see the question from Samuel? He's actually asking, these
Yeah,
booth regulations seem really strict. How does Blue Hive design team, of which Dana
they
leads this group,
they
how
are.
do they approach building that?
They are.
We've got somebody here who can answer that.
The rules and regulations in general with exhibits seem to be getting more and more strict as years go by. And some of them are for safety, right? Obviously, and all of those regulations are, yep, check, no problem. Completely agree. Some of them, I'll just say me personally, I don't want a blanket statement. People, I feel like some of
Mm,
them are a little overkill because clients are paying for this square of concrete or rectangle concrete. And like, in a perfect world, being, a designer who wants to make something super shiny for our clients, I want to use all of that space for them. At pharmaceutical shows specifically, they tend to also have more sightline restrictions, being able to see through a booth, or traffic line restrictions, which a see-through versus a pass-through are two different types of rules and regulations. You'll notice like a lot of pharma shows, the hanging signs tend to be very large, and then what's happening on the floor tends that they leave a lot of space between them because of, say, maybe rules at that show that they have to hit. So how do we come up with things that are different? That is where designers' brains live. They can't shut their brains off. They're absorbing everything, not just from, say, pharmaceutical industry and med devices, but all the other industries that we work within. We're always cross-pollinating ideas. Or if we go somewhere on the weekend, like our brains are always bringing things in. So in its simplest form,
She does that for real.
yeah, it's obnoxious because it never shuts off. It's awful. It's kind of
Pictures from the weekend, like I'm in this retail
Dawn
environment, and
Marie,
it's
Yeah.
really
you're
cool.
not
Look
going
at
to
this.
believe this.
I'm like, I don't want to think about work right now, but this is a good idea.
Yes.
So, um, w- if you, in its simplest form, if you think of like two competing brands, like just like something that everybody knows, like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, or like VW and, like, I don't know, Audi or something. If you picture you're going to make an exhibit for them, and I'm going to oversimplify because I can't draw for you right now. When I talk better if I can draw. um, but like, if you couldn't put the logo on those two exhibits, right? They had to be like naked exhibits. What would be something about the structure and the shape, the form, the interactivity, or even the color, that if you were just looking at the two of them next to them, you go, well, that one's Coca-Cola, even though the logo's not there, and that one's Pepsi, right? That's where designers start to first make the differentiated when they're working on a project. So every company, when a designer starts to work on it, not only do we want the designer to have a direct contact conversation for a discovery call, info pickup call with the client and your account executive, account manager, um, we want them to have that call to ask a lot of questions. We ask questions about things like what they don't like. People don't always know what they do like, but they always know what they don't like. We ask things about, their brand guidelines, all that type of thing. How will they know the goal that the show was a success for them, right? the designer takes all of that stuff in when they go to make that booth look different from, say, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola, even if there are no logos on it, right? So the designer does a lot of research before they can even start, whether the designer who just jumps right into modeling on the computer, or if the type of designer who needs to sketch things out in their head a little bit.
Can I just add, you
Yeah.
guys also, you study, especially in pharma, in the device, you study the device, you study the compound, you study the science behind it. So it's not just walls, you bring it
No.
alive.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if it's say it's a medication, designers want to know, well, how does that medication work?
Yes.
And that's kind of how we also solve the story of the exhibit, of how it comes to life.
Yeah.
Because if the attendee doesn't understand after they visit that exhibit why that medication is important, then like we feel like we failed. Like the exhibit carries a lot of weight. It is an environment where attendee needs to have a very meaningful, impactful educational experience. So it's all very tangled and tied together. But that's all that designers do, is they tell stories through structure and imagery and experiences. So.
And it's so innovative. And I feel like we have like some of the smartest, most brilliant designers here, because you guys really understand the science and you translate it. So it's not something frightening. To me, I feel as though your team really looks at it with passion, and to get the science to a precision, which will then draw in the HCPs to ask the right questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
'Cause
and
that's what it's really about.
we have a very diverse team as far as the creatives here.
Mm.
We have very high level creatives, mid level. We have not entry level at this exact moment, but more. I don't even want to say junior, but just let's say less amount of years, right? And so they'll all work on projects together so that they can all cross pollinate each other with ideas. So you'll have these very high level creatives basically showing and teaching, maybe say the younger group, how to think and come at a design from a strategic
The
standpoint that
sexy
way.
science.
And then
Yeah.
you also have some of we'll say the younger, they're not always necessarily younger, but we'll call them younger for the purpose of this conversation. Well, maybe some of the younger people coming up with ideas and brainstorming things that maybe they don't know can't work, but it is the seed of an idea that causes something in brainstorming to come up with something completely new and different. So it's really that combination of the really diverse creatives that we have working together that make it really great. And many of these designers have worked on pharmaceutical clients specifically for a long time, and seen how that industry changes, both in their rules, regulations, their science, their advances, the FDA, the new laws and regulations, and also how booths specifically have changed. So like over 30 years, pharmaceutical booths now are different than like when I first started.
I think we're going to give Samuel the question of the day, because he just got like a 10-minute super deep dive answer. That's like its own podcast on its own. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We try to bring the toolbox. You usually bring it in around 40 minutes or so. We're already about 30. We're close to 28 minutes. So, Dawn Marie, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So, navigating the regulations. We've got the Sunshine Act, and you've got submissions. So, I think a lot of folks out there have probably heard about the Sunshine Act, but talk a little bit about the role of our compliance partners and how we utilize them when it relates to those things.
So I love history, and I can share a little bit of history. So Sunshine Act, actually, the real name of it is Open Payments. And it actually began with a small group of people here in Massachusetts. And it was elective at the time, and they were from different pharmaceutical companies. And what was happening is, and it's really interesting because I grew up and I worked for 4 years for a very prominent cardiologist. And I remember very specifically, and this is when I was in high school, and there would be pharma reps coming in, and they would be giving him like golf things. They would be taking him and his wife on weekends to Florida. They would go on this beautiful private yacht in the Virgin Islands for a week, and they would get their CMEs and, a lot of that. And then the giveaways. So back in the early 2000s, there was an event that happened at one of the pharmaceutical events where the exhibiting company actually was giving away luggage. And the doctors were pushing in so heavily just to get a piece of luggage. It pushed this custom build counter over. It was insane. So all of this was happening at the same time, okay? So the group in Massachusetts came together and they said, you know what? I think we need to start making these conferences patient-centric. It needs to be about the patients, not about what the doctors are going to get. And so this was elective to begin with, and it started with, if you're going to do a giveaway, let it be something educational in nature. And more over time, more and more states elected to start working within what they call the Sunshine Act or open payments, because Sunshine Act really allowed the sun to shine. And it's not illegal for a company to give a doctor a car, and not that they're going to, right? But now there's a platform that you go on, which is a legal site with the government. And so if you're going to give a doctor a car, you have to list that you're giving the doctor a car. You have to list that you're giving a doctor a payment for any type of fiscal transaction, whatever it is. So it's another whole layer that was added to, say, the pharmaceutical or medical device company. Now, again, medical device was not involved in the beginning. And then there was AdvaMed, which is an American-based kind of sunshine type of organization. And then Eucamed is over in Europe. So right now, if an exhibitor or a pharmaceutical company wants to give anything away that's of tangible amount, the government has said, okay, well, anything, I think it's $12 or $13 or under. So if you want to give away that coffee or that cookie, if it's under this certain amount, it does not have to be registered. It doesn't have to be scanned and uploaded to the site. But if I were to think, okay, I'm a doctor and I'm going to go to 10 shows, and maybe all 10 of those events have the same pharmaceutical company. Maybe it's a different audience, a different compound, whatever it might be. That's where that company has to have, their legal and compliance team have to have the tolerance of really what they want to do. Some companies, they scan every single badge that's coming up to get that cup of coffee or cookie. And then other companies have the mindset is, you know what, we've got one compound, we're going to go to these many shows. Even if the doctor comes to our booth every time, it's not going to, add up to the point that we really have to go onto the site and put it in. So also associations now, some of them are actually, they're not allowing any kind of giveaway other than something that is educational. We are finding that associations are sometimes driving this. So even if, for example, I'm a pharmaceutical company and I want to give out coffee and cookies, well, some of these associations are now saying, no, we're not going to even allow that in our floor. We're not going to allow it in the hall. And that because everybody's going to be balanced and equal. And by the way, what we will provide for our HCPs are coffee stations, it might have a little bite to eat. So it's more centralized versus by each exhibiting company. Does that help?
That does help a lot, because I guess to look at the brass tacks of it is, the more paperwork, the more complication, it becomes a nuisance factor, and the docs, nobody wants to always be putting paperwork in and always reporting and so forth. But I mean, the impetus of the rule is tremendous, right? It's like I'm very happy to understand that the doctors aren't prescribing a certain medication because they got a trip to Aruba, right?
That's what
medication actually works. That's why they're going to.
Yeah,
agreed.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really, again, to protect the patients.
Yeah. And I'd rather see them put those funds towards the exhibit and the experience anyway.
That's right. Exactly.
Well,
can
I share this? It's really interesting. So we had a client that it's an orphan drug, and an orphan drug is actually a drug that treats a very small population. The US government really gives out a lot of grants to different companies to do the research, like, for example, Tourette's. Back in the 1970s, and I don't know if it goes up to the 1980s, but definitely the 1970s, Tourette's, there was nothing to treat Tourette's syndrome. And so part of that, there's been different drugs now over the years, but it also sometimes can have a longer patent life. And it could be a world population of 2,000 to 3,000 people. But one of our clients actually have an orphan drug. And it's really interesting, because what happened is there were 3 different side effects to a certain disease. And nobody pulled it all together. Like, doctors were looking at, well, you've got this symptom, so you must have this, or you have that symptom, so you must have that. But the reality is they had something very different. So what we did to educate the doctors, we actually created something that was, does your patient have this symptom or that symptom or that symptom? Because if they have these 3 symptoms, it might not be 1, 2, or 3, but it could actually be this disease. And we now have a compound that's just been FDA approved to treat the disease. And, this part of this disease is, it's almost as though patient has big blocks laying on them, like they can't move. They literally, it's that bad. But this new compound, if the doctors can actually diagnose properly. So what we can do, and what we are doing, is working with our clients to create these really important pieces to educate doctors to say, hey, let's work with you, because we want to educate you so that you can better diagnose your patient. Does that make sense?
It does. That's tremendous.
That's better than a cup of coffee. I mean,
that is way better than a cup of coffee.
Coffee's good. And another little piece. So when there was a panel at another association that we were able to interview doctors, and every single one of them said, well, we love being on the show hall. We enjoy being there. Number 1 is to look at the pipeline. Number 2 is to see where progress is going on. Number 3, we love coffee and cookies. We love it.
Third most popular reason.
They also go really to be with their peers, because one of the things that came out of COVID was they weren't able to get with their peers. And part of the power of being with their peers is working out the challenges that they're having, or being able to diagnose a patient. And when they come together, that's the strength of these conventions, where they're meeting, they're together, they're having conversations. So that's where the strength of what we do comes into play, that we are part of that in the convention hall.
I can see that anytime I've gone to a convention, anytime I've gone to a TED Talk, anytime I've gone to any industry, organization gathering, I always learn additional things. I mean, doing this 30 years, I still constantly learn new
Mhm.
things. And I
Yeah.
feel like the more I can learn, the better designer I am, or the better strategist I am, or
Mhm.
client advocate, or company advocate, or organizational strategist, whatever you want to call. I just feel like it's so good to like continuous education. I learn so much when I'm surrounded by people who are smarter than me, or who have been
Yes.
exposed to different things than I have. Um, Before Chris asks his next question, I just wanted to give Dawn Marie an opportunity to highlight two industry organizations that, if someone's either in pharmaceutical,
Mm.
on the client side, if they don't know about, or if they know about and they haven't looked into yet, they might want to. And that is, could you talk a little bit, just briefly, of like what is HCEA and why a client might want to look into that, because they do a lot of great work for the industry.
They do. So HCEA, there's nothing like it as an association. It was founded decades ago, where it actually brings together three different powers. So it's the pharmaceutical or med device company, or life sciences, so anything in the biotech industry. And then it brings together associations, and then it also brings together partners, and partners such as an exhibit house, an AV partner. It could be a creative writing partner. It could be anything that it's a catering partner. So any type of partner that your pharma or med device company would want to be partnered with in the convention hall, that's the third branch that's really brought in. And what I have found, I actually joined HCA. It was probably 12 or 13 years ago, and they were very welcoming. I met the global marketing manager, for example, at the time, Sue Huff, who was also the HCA president, Carol Fields from Edwards Life Sciences, Don Schmidt from Pfizer. These were people, when I first began, didn't even know who they were, but they were really, they broke ground in the industry with how they wanted to communicate and how they wanted to exhibit at conventions. And part of the strength of HCA is bringing in strong thought leaders to educate during, say, they have an annual meeting, and sometimes they even have a marketing summit. So it just depends. But you also have all of this together under one umbrella when we meet for the annual meeting. And it gives everyone an opportunity to get to know each other. Just like when the doctors come together, we also come together as a team. It's a small knit group. And I say, small, hundreds, right? And so that gives us the opportunity to have better conversations. It's almost like your tier 3 event. Anybody out there that has the tier 3 events, there's a purpose for tier 3, because you have better communication, maybe more one-on-ones. So HCA was founded, and this year we're excited because we're a platinum sponsor, and really, really encourage anybody that doesn't know or has not become a member or is interested in attending, would really encourage you to do this. There's just it's a really important place to be a part of if you're looking to grow and be educated specifically in that realm. So,
So
yeah,
the HCEA stands for the Healthcare Exhibitors Association. So you can go to their
healthcare.
website,
Yes,
yep, and
yes.
to learn more about them as an organization. Because, like I said, they're always doing great things to help, chaperone our industry, and bring, information, education. And they do have a show coming up. What month is that?
It's August.
It's
I think it's
August.
like the
Yes.
3rd through 7th of
Yes.
August, or right around there, 5th through 7th.
So
So
right, and Blue
we'll
Hive will
be
be
there.
there because, like I said, it's an important industry event to be at. And Dawn Marie will be speaking. I'll actually be on a separate panel, leading a conversation. Well, not leading the conversation, part of a conversation. And then the other is just quickly, anyone who's listening, it's really important to look into the exhibitors advocate with Jessica Sylvia. Go to the exhibitor advocate website, because especially if you're a client, you're on the client side, if there's anything that you're struggling with your show, the exhibitor advocate, they can really help you with that. If there's something that like we can't fix because it's beyond our control, the organizers are not going to listen to us. We're not their end client. You're the end client. So the Exhibitors Advocate is really an amazing group. So please check them out. Reach out to them. They also, I know they've been at Exhibitor Live. They maybe even have been at the Event Marketers Summit. But you check them out. They're very helpful for clients.
Dana, can I add just a little bit to that, which is really interesting, so in August of 2024, Comic-Con was coming into San Diego, and the union actually went on strike just a few days before the installation was going to take place. And an unprecedented deal came between the city and the unions for labor rates. So the city union actually had an increase of 55%. We have seen across the board that has gone from city to city, and that is increasing your material handling rates to an unprecedented amount. Some cases up to 100% increases. So the exhibitor advocate has actually been going, and they've been sitting with unions, and they've been trying to negotiate these things. They've also been encouraging, if you are an association, for example, start going to tier 2 cities that are willing to be more compromising or non-union labor cities. So again, the strength of the exhibitor advocate is really the voice of the exhibitors. And I do encourage, as Dana shared,
I really appreciate all their effort, and they're only going to be as good as all the clients that join and participate and find what some of the biggest common issues to be at least addressed or solved are. So yeah, I really appreciate that group.
Right. And there is no cost to get involved. So definitely, do some investigating, check it out. And it can only help the entire industry as a whole, as well as your own bottom line. If you stand up.
But as a member, truthfully, it's like $299 as a member, and you have
short money once you're
access
and you
to
request
all
a little bit more
kinds
information.
of education and white papers and seminars. Like they're becoming a powerhouse of information. So.
Absolutely. We'll have to actually, in the show notes, we'll have to include the episode that Jessica was on just a couple of weeks ago, because that was a great one to review. So listen, we do have more questions on the docket here. We're going to have to go to part 2 because we are at 47 minutes. We want to wrap this up and let everybody kind of move on with their day. But this has been fantastic. Dawn Marie, you've shared some really great insights. There's this kind of not secret world by any means, but it's an area that there's so many regulations, there's so many rules that have to be followed that if folks are wondering, like, who do you talk to, you got to find a company that has expertise in this area. You don't want to be an experiment with somebody that's not done it before. So one thing that we do here on the Toolbox as we wrap up is we ask our guest, can you leave us with 3 takeaways or 3 little gold nuggets, for our listeners, something they can take away and maybe they're actionable pieces or just things to kind of marinate on?
That's a great question. So I think number 1 would be finding the right partner. That is immensely important. You do not want to take a risk. And part of that really is finding the partner that understands, that maybe even has a compliance team inside, really understands your market segment. Number 2, finding a team which really understands the value of the space that you're in, but as well as two-way communication. Part of creativity is the synergy of coming back and forth, right? Like anything that's created or built, when you have a team and you're working with a partner that really wants to be a part of the intellect, the intelligence, the creativity, it's really having that open two-way communication between agencies, because there's multiple agencies. There's your own brand and marketing teams, and you have to have a solid conduit, and that would be where your exhibit house comes in, is that solid conduit and project management tool. And then really, number 3, and I put this as number 3, but really it's the power of precision and passion. I mean, really, precision and passion. The passion or the precision of getting it right, and the passion of understanding what we're looking to accomplish, as well as the passion and the creativity of bringing in the intelligence and the science of what you're doing. So I hope that helps bring in those 3 important areas that I think could be key takeaways.
And the BlueMed team definitely has all of those. So
all of that.
yeah, you guys have
and thank you for the when you drop the 3, with alliteration, the 3 Ps. I mean, chef's kiss, right? Perfect. That's a perfect way to end
power,
it.
precision, and passion.
Power to the people, baby. Awesome. Well, this has been fun and really informative. We really appreciate it. Dawn Marie, how can people reach out and connect with you if they want to get more specific or have more questions?
I love to be called. I love emails. I'll pick up the phone 24/7. So
there you go. Your phone number is right there.
My direct line is 774-502-0568. I am 24/7 for real because I travel globally. And my email address is dmraczka@blue-hive.com. You can also message me on LinkedIn. So I am really excited to hear from you and look forward to having a real conversation, and truly appreciate you, Chris, again, and Dana for inviting me to today's session. I feel very honored.
Well, we're honored to have you. This has been one of the most informative and deepest dive episodes. We are, I believe, episode number 25 here. So we're almost at a half. Next week marks a half a year we've been doing this. Dana, you've been my traveling co-host here about half the time or so. We're building a community of helpful, like-minded event professionals who want to kind of get together, share information, and help each other, and just kind of raise the bar across the board. So thank you so much. Share this episode with your friends and associates in the industry. This episode, obviously we're wrapping up live here, but this is available here on LinkedIn. It's on YouTube. And you can play that forever and ever in a day. We're also on all of the podcast platforms as well. So if you like to consume, perhaps you're listening in the future, via a podcast. But thanks very much. Thanks to the Fist Bump team. Thank you to Dawn Marie and Dana and our sponsors, both Fist Bump and Blue Hive. And everybody have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
See you later.